All right, let's dive right into today's explainer, because we are looking at a truly wild cultural phenomenon. We're going to see what actually happens when an entire nation collectively decides that, well, sleep is entirely optional. I mean, willingly upending your entire sleep cycle for a football match happening thousands of miles away, that is commitment. We're breaking down Scotland's incredibly dramatic 1-0 win over Haiti in Boston. But as you're going to see, this wasn't just your standard fixture. This was something so much heavier. This was literally the exorcism of the Tartan Army.
I mean, just think about the absolute scale of the collective madness that gripped Scotland before this late-night kickoff. We're not just talking about a handful of hardcore fans here. We're talking about a society-wide shift. Pubs hitting absolute maximum capacity before midnight. People literally setting alarm clocks for those ungodly hours usually reserved for milk deliveries. And honestly, HR departments everywhere were quietly bracing for a massive, highly suspicious wave of sick leave the next morning. It's an extraordinary level of psychological commitment to 11 guys in dark blue shirts.
And hey, we can't talk about football fandom without talking about the superstitions, right? They run deep. Somewhere out there in Scotland right now, there is a supporter who is absolutely convinced that throwing on a faded, unwashed lucky top, one they originally wore against Norway way back in 2007, is somehow going to bend the laws of physics and influence a match all the way over in Boston. To anyone on the outside, it sounds completely absurd, but to a Scot, that's just what you do. It's just an accepted reality of international tournament football.
So the really big question we have to ask ourselves here is, why? Why wreck your entire routine and subject yourself to all that stress for a game that was, let's be honest, pretty labored and anxiety-inducing? It was an ugly 1-0 win. The aesthetics were not pretty. It definitely wasn't a masterpiece you'd hang in the Louvre. And yet, this scrappy victory over Haiti somehow had drinks absolutely flying across the OVO Hydro in Glasgow at 2:28 in the morning. If you're only looking at the tactical elegance of the match, you're missing the whole point.
The real answer? Well, it's hidden right beneath the surface, and it comes down to one number, 36. Now, that is not just a statistic. That number represents a massive, overwhelming psychological weight. We are talking about a 36-year sporting trauma haunting Scottish football. So that explosion of joy in Glasgow, that wasn't just about beating Haiti. That was the explosive release of 3.5 decades of pent-up frustration, near misses, and just absolute heartbreak.
To really wrap your head around that agonizing weight, you actually have to go all the way back to Italy '90, a 2-1 win over Sweden. That was the last time Scotland tasted a victory at a World Cup finals. Just think about that for a second. For a whole generation of the Tartan Army, a World Cup win wasn't a memory, it was a totally abstract concept. It's like a stable macroeconomic policy or a hot British summer. You hear rumors about it, but you never actually experience it. That long, painful journey from 1990 to this tense win in Boston is the defining narrative here. Okay, let's fast forward to the 28th minute and see how this all builds up to the decisive moment. The talisman himself, John McGinn, scores the winner, but we really need to talk about how he scored it. In the absolute finest traditions of Scottish football vocabulary, this goal was a proper sclaff. There was zero cinematic quality to this strike. It was scuffed, it was awkward, it took a massive deflection, totally wrong-footed the Haitian goalkeeper, and then just agonizingly trickled across the line. It wasn't beautiful, but honestly, it was absolutely perfect.
And this brings us to a really fascinating contrast. Modern football culture has kind of conditioned us to confuse entertainment with effectiveness, right? We watch highlight reels all day, so we expect 30 consecutive passes, Brazilian flair, and a perfectly choreographed ballet on the pitch. But reality is wonderfully untidy. Scotland didn't go out and dismantle Haiti with Spanish elegance. No, they survived. They dug in, defended, and engaged in this highly effective struggle for survival. And in tournament football, that stubborn refusal to panic is exactly the kind of thing that gets you through.
Of course, the international media cycle doesn't always appreciate that untidy reality. They love a cynical angle. Just look at Roy Keane before the match. With his classic brand of joyful optimism, and yes, that's sarcasm, he completely dismissed John McGinn. He basically likened him to a pub player when he's off his game. It's exactly the kind of grandiose, negative narrative this Scottish squad has had to put up with for years.
But you know what's brilliant? How the team just brushes it off. After putting in 90 minutes of brutal defensive resilience to dismantle Keane's logic, McGinn gave this perfectly dry, humorous response. He probably has a point, but the victory belongs to the collective. That right there is the essence of this squad. They refuse to get sucked into media drama. They know exactly who they are, they know their strengths, and they will always prioritize the collective result over any kind of individual vanity.
And the architect behind that collective mindset? The manager? Steve Clarke. His whole philosophy is rooted in pure pragmatism over romantic football. Clarke understands a really fundamental truth. Tournament football does not care if your defenders look like the second coming of Franz Beckenbauer. His side rarely plays the kind of football that inspires poetry. Instead, they produce structure. Pure structural survival. In a highly competitive landscape where every team has elite athletes, structure is what keeps you standing when everyone else has run out of gas.
And what's great is that Clarke is incredibly level-headed about it. You won't see any empty, triumphalist sentimentality from him. Actually, scratch that, he actively draws a strict line between the result and the performance. He was super candid after the whistle, admitting that while making history was outstanding, the performance itself was pretty functional, labored even. There were nerves, wayward passes, second-half fatigue. Haiti just didn't have the clinical finishing to punish them, but Clarke knows the heavyweights of global football won't be so forgiving. So they still need some serious tactical calibration.
But hey, despite the need for improvement, let's look at the cold, hard mechanics of the tournament table right now. Over in New Jersey, Brazil and Morocco played out a super tactical 1-1 draw. Because of that draw and Scotland's scrappy 1-0 win, the Tartan Army is currently sitting, unbelievably if you look at the last 3 decades of history, at the absolute summit of Group C. 3 points for Scotland, putting them right above heavyweights like Brazil and Morocco. Incredible.
So looking ahead to the harsh reality of actually having to play Brazil and Morocco, the whole narrative has shifted. Scotland has finally traded in their existential dread for something way more valuable. For 36 years, fans traveled just expecting disappointment. But today they carry evidence. Evidence that history is not fixed. Evidence that past failures don't dictate what happens next, and that those scrappy, difficult victories count just as much on the board. And most importantly, evidence that sometimes the ugliest, most deflected goals, a proper sclaff, become a nation's most beautiful memories.
Which brings us to a final thought for you to ponder today. In a world completely obsessed with aesthetic perfection and flashy highlight reels, is it possible that in the brutal arena of tournament football, the ultimate beauty isn't found in 30 perfect passes? Maybe it's actually found in resilience, organization, and the simple, stubborn act of surviving. I'll leave you to chew on that. Thanks for joining me to unpack the true nature of this collective sporting triumph.